Hi, I'm Godless Engineer, and you're watching Atheist Edge.
Okay, well, Brian did want to talk about his art, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, see, now I backpedaled. See, I'll talk about martial arts. I want to art, and then you say that, and now I'm like, wait, what the hell does it do with you know?
Well, if I can say real quick, his art has evolved. So when I knew him 37 years ago, his art, he's really good at doing what many artists find impossible, is accurately depicting the human form, right? So that's his forte. He can do that in a way that comes so natural. I mean, he can just take a number two pencil and a piece of lined paper and put something on it that I'm a person very, very left-brained. Music, art, poetry, literature rarely makes me get chills. I'm the type of person that thinks cold, hard logic. But when Brian puts something on paper, very often throughout my entire life, it's given me some chills. That being said, it's evolved now with the erotic art and the sci-fi art. We haven't even talked about that yet. Brian does a lot. Okay, if for those of you that are old enough to remember, before Star Wars action figures, there was a thing called Micronauts, right? And I personally owned almost all of them, and it was a heartbreaking day when I went off to boot camp and my mom sold them in a garage sale. I don't want to talk about it because the pain is still, the wound is still deep. But these were these small. You'll see them on the screen right now. In editing, I'll put them up. But Brian is a huge fan also of these Micronaut action figures, so he's been recreating new versions of the old Micronauts magazines, and they are just immensely popular. That and the erotic art, which that's what he shows in his galleries. Tell me if any of this is wrong, Brian, but I liken it to kind of a cross between Marquis de Sade and Patrick Nagle, for those of you that maybe know that.
Okay, well, first of all, Patrick Nagle was definitely an influence. He was influenced by Japanese woodblock prints, and so things were very two-dimensional, but somehow he gave the impression of depth without actually using shading and things like that. So he was one of many influences for me, especially early on. He was a big one, but as time went on, he became absolutely synonymous with the 80s. I mean, every damn nail salon in the US or probably abroad had, poorly done copies of his work on their, front window. But it's a striking visual style. So, and he did the Rio album cover for Duran Duran. That's where a lot of people recognize his work. And so, of course, being a new wave guy and being into, the female form, I mean, it was only natural. Unfortunately, because I looked up to him so much, I also took on some of his traits as well, as far as like, a complete avoidance of physical exercise, bad treatment of myself. It's really what's kept me young. But he ended up dying because he exercised once. So probably not a great role model in that respect, but he was just a gentle and awesome human being. There are many, many more. One of the biggest that I definitely want to give a shout out to is a female artist out in California named Olivia. And she did all kinds of really great kind of cheesecake and slash, some of her stuff kind of verged into the fetish world a bit. There's some stuff with leather and whatnot. But
That was weird, but when you said her name,
Mhm.
it didn't come through. What was her name?
Oh, Olivia.
Okay.
And I want to say her last name, but I butcher it every single time. It's like DeBardinas or Derabardinas or something. Yeah, I always screw it up. But anyway, she was really actually the biggest influence to my work, I would say, as far as, well, in a lot of respects. And then, of course, the Japanese artist, Hajime Soriyama. And then I can't avoid the massive influence. And I almost hesitate to bring his name up because people usually only know him for the work he did in film design. But the truth is he was one of the greatest surrealists, if not the greatest surrealist of our time, is Hans Rudy Gieger, or H.R. Gieger. People say Geiger. and they're wrong because he said Gieger. I'll go with how he pronounces his own name personally. But anyway, you can't copy his work. You can't emulate it. Everybody who tries always misses the mark. You can tell an authentic Gieger, from a copy any day. But a lot of his dark biomechanical aesthetic has made it through into my work, primarily in the backdrops. I treat every piece that I do as almost two pieces. I do a backdrop and create an atmosphere, and then I paint the subject, or usually woman, in front of it, and go from there. So yeah, I don't want to take.
You would say that a Gieger, how did you say is one of your biggest influences? Is it the dark sexual aspect of it?
He mostly the dark aspect for sure. His stuff wasn't necessarily sexual. Well, I mean, it was actually, it's highly. But what's interesting is that he turns it into landscapes and almost like alien atmospheres, where you kind of look at it and you go, "Oh, that's weird. That's crazy. Some kind of alien atmosphere. Wait a minute, that's a butt with a thing going." It's not overt. Where my stuff is very much. I'm a realist. He was a surrealist. So I like creating a surreal atmosphere, but then I'm a complete realist when it comes to the subject. In fact, a few of my pieces people have mistaken for photographs, which is technically a compliment. But as an artist, it's like, wait, because people say, well, if it looks too real, why don't you just take a picture? It's like, well, because these outfits don't exist, or these beings don't exist really, for the most part. More and more over
Or
the years.
it's like if you do it super realistic, you're trying to capture a moment or some aspect of your subject's personality or something. It shows up with hyperrealism.
In that respect, I almost consider myself a photographer more. When I work with people around the world, I relate to photographers far more than I do with artists. I can't stand hanging out with other artists. But photographers and I have the same sensibility. We have a very clear idea of what we want, and we do it. We use so I always joke with my photographer friends. I'm like, yeah, I'm a photographer too. I just have a really slow camera, so it's pretty much that. Yeah, I mean, well, here's the interesting thing. People oftentimes say, well, art is supposed to be the language of the subconscious, and therefore realism is overrated, like, surrealism or abstract or impressionism. This is really more artistic. I get why they say that, but here's an interesting point. When you dream, say you have a dream about hanging out with your friends. Are they abstract in the dream? Are their noses over here and their eyes over here? No. Are they impressionist? Mm-hmm. How does your mind represent those people in your dreams within the context of realism? 100%. Sometimes the atmospheres where, we've all had that dream where you're like, oh, I was at so-and-so's house, but it wasn't the house, but I knew it was their house, that crap. But you dream in realism. Well, that's the subconscious mind representing things. So if you really want to talk about the language of the subconscious, it is actually realism.
Well, with abstract, it may have been fresh at the time, because how many hundreds of years, even thousands of years, of artists portraying religious subjects do we have?
Right.
And then, so along comes abstract art, and it's like, why should we be copying anything, realistic? Can we communicate in another way? Like Kandinsky, he wanted to imitate music. Like, music doesn't imitate anything in life, except for like birdsong and stuff like that. But it's a new language of its own, and they were trying to experiment with that. And before abstraction, if I'm not mistaken, or it might have been after. I think it was after. There was what you're talking about, surrealism and Dada, Salvador Dali. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about the subconscious mind, more dealing with dreams and things like that. And those are more interesting subjects to me than another Madonna and Child,
Right. Well, and that, and that's the thing is I appreciate all forms of art, honestly, except for when people tape bananas to walls and call it art. That's I am the first, and I am a maverick, and I have made a lot of enemies in the art world. But taping a wall and calling it art is a lack of talent, and it is horse shit. And there's a lot of that crap out there. It's getting worse by the year, honestly. So I kind of get a little stick up my ass about it, and it's not the good kind. But when it comes to like proper surrealism and abstract and, you know, I think what it is it's a representation of what people perceive or the notion of the subconscious mind. You know, my whole thing about realism being how you dream, that's more of a defense of realism. But the truth is you always got to bring something new to the table. Otherwise, why not just take a photo? You know, there's truth to that for sure.
Yeah, the camera did destroy a lot of, I guess, portrait artists that made a living that way.
Yeah.
There you had the camera. We could take pictures.
Right. Yeah, because at the time it was a thing of necessity. You know, and now, because now people will download these apps on their phone that they can take a selfie and make it look like a painting.
Yes.
Guess what? If you have an app, okay, here's something that I'll say about creativity in the world and technology. A lot of artists are anti-technology. They hate the idea of digital photography, for example. And then everybody can just use the camera on their phone to take a photo and then throw a filter on it and then throw it out there and say it's artistic. Well, yeah, because here's the thing. We've all done this. You see a sunset or something, right? And you go, ooh, that's cool. You take a picture with your phone, but it just doesn't do it justice. It doesn't look, or seeing it. So you throw in a filter and you go, there, that looks more like what I'm actually experiencing. That's fucking art.
Yeah.
Is sharing using some tool. I don't care if it's a phone app or a paintbrush. Using a tool at your disposal, to take something you experienced and be able to share it the way you saw it with other people.
Sunrises sometimes are about awe and wonder, and they say atheists can't experience that. But I think art, even like movies and comic books, to me are art because if they provoke thought.
Absolutely.
It doesn't always have to be wonder, awe. Sometimes it can be horror. You know, I was reading about, and I can't even sit through Aliens with my husband. Speaking of Gieger. You know, because it's so horrifying and gory. But I was reading about how they decided to make it scarier by making the face huggers kind of an act of rape. And that just added a scary element to it. That
added a huge element, especially in the very first film. The alien literally is a phallus. The head is a phallus that opens up and reveals yet another phallus that can then penetrate through the skull of another person. I mean, it's forced oral, you know. And there's a scene where it kills somebody by snaking its tail between their legs, and it goes right up behind their, right up through their crotch, and then stabs them in the back. There's a ton of that in that movie. It's a reproductive horror is really why that first movie succeeds as a horror film better than anything that had been done since, really.
I've seen the first one, but I just I couldn't after that.
Right.
It's horrifying. And I don't mean to confuse rape scenes with art. That's the art itself. But if you're talking about horror, that's a horror a lot of people experience, and women live with that, but men kind of do too, because that's a horrifying thing to men as well as all, but they don't go around fearing it every day.
Right.
But if it were to happen to them, I don't mean to keep on this subject because it's disturbing, and sometimes art's disturbing. But I haven't seen. I think it was Deliverance either. The one with Burt Reynolds. The one with the banjos and the river.
Wheel Like a Pig.
Yeah.
You sure got a pretty mouth, boy. Why don't you steal it for me? Yeah, man.
And Burt Reynolds said he went to see it in the movie theater, and he saw men get up and leave. you know, not just women during that scene. Like they couldn't stomach it.
It's a good topic. Honestly, it's an important topic because really what it comes down to is, and this is something that's important to me, you know, as an artist depicting sexy things, is that my whole mission is to really establish the idea of that part of yourself, your sexuality, you own it. I don't care if somebody is a, you know, a Puritan or a freak show, but that's yours. And it's nobody else's business to tell you what to do with it. So if you want to take it and you want to rock it out and have fun with it, I mean, who doesn't want to be Dracula for the night and seduce someone from across the room with their hand? You know, how fun is that? But the thing is, back to what you're saying about, you know, the concept of rape. Let's take, for example, you walk out the door, and many of us have had this experience at some point in our life. You go out the door in the morning, you get ready to get in your car, and suddenly you notice somebody's been in your car. You know, whether a window's busted out or whether there's just things all over the place, it's an invasion. It was not invited. It is not consensual, whether it's sexual or even our property, because, hey, we're fucking Americans. Our property may as well be our goddamn soul. You know, the thing is that it's the concept of non-consensual, unwilling invasion. And that is a fear because it leaves scars. It's something that makes you feel powerless. It's absolutely wrong. If we can get moral, I mean, I can get Nietzsche-esque, you know, and say whatever. But the truth is that we can all relate to that feeling of invasion. And that's where I think a lot of fears stem from, whether it's xenophobia, racism, whatever. It's just goddamn fear. But when you cut it down to the core, back to the topic here, that's a real form of invasion. That's a real form of something or someone was intimately involved in your living, in your being, without your fucking consent and without your invite. That's a horrifying.
I don't get into like the slasher and gory horror. Like I'm more like a Dracula, you know, just that kind of thing, and more psychological horror. But for some people, maybe seeing that kind of thing on screen helps to relieve some of the fear that they feel or something. Because a lot of people are into the kind of disturbing horror films.
May I interject?
Yeah.
Without interrupting? I love slasher films. I love horror films. Horror films are my absolute. I've probably seen every horror film ever made. And one of the most disturbing horror films, and it fits right into this discussion, is because it is horror that makes you horrified because of what you're actually horrified. You're not necessarily just because somebody's getting slashed up, you're actually horrified. And that is I Spit on Your Grave is one of the original 1978 version. It was known as Day of the Woman in Europe, but it actually has 45 minutes of that 90-minute movie is literally graphic rape scenes. Graphic. And you are literally sitting there just absolutely nauseous in your seat. If you're a normal person, you don't even want to, you want to close your eyes. You don't even want to look at it. And the director said there's absolutely no soundtrack in this movie. It doesn't tell you when to be scared like music does. It doesn't tell you should be looking and see who's coming up behind you. It just puts it in your face. And you're literally watching this. You're so horrified. You can't look away. It's like a train wreck. But yet in the end, when she takes revenge on these men, it makes that revenge a whole lot sweeter, if that makes sense. It's horror that makes you horrified because it is horrible. It's not like you're normal. And then the remake of it, the 2010 remake, ups the game. Like her revenge in the original was very satisfying. In the 2010 remake, it was even more satisfying because they made it even more grueling. But in the 2010, they cut those graphic rape scenes down to about 20 minutes because I'm sure in change of audience and stuff. But just because we were talking about horror films and the power of those kinds of themes, that horror movie sprung into my mind because it really is the best example of how to make people actually scared for something you actually need to be scared about instead of a monster coming at you with nails on his gloves or something, you know.
Let's see. That's a great segue, Tracy. I had one question for you, but first, The what scared me, okay, as a child, what scared me was all the vampire-ish type of creatures that were crawling out of this basement in Salem's Lot. And I'm sure if I go back to and watch Salem, if you go back and watch any of your old scary, my wife's is The Hand with I forget who is with someone famous,
Oh,
but The Hand is some old, who, can you
Steven
remember?
Spielberg's first movie, Duel with
Yeah.
Dennis. It's just this crazy trucker trying to run this guy, Dennis Weaver, the guy, the dad from Gentle Ben, literally trying to run him off the road the entire time, trying to kill him for no reason other than he's there.
Yeah.
That's like real gripping fear. And it makes you
Yeah.
like, if a 18-wheeler comes up behind us anytime, I'm like, shit, you know, just because of that movie.
It leaves a mental image on us, but if we go back and watch it, we're like, oh, I was scared of that. But
Yeah, now it's kinda
recently,
hokey,
the
but-
only thing that has scared me in my adult life, other than getting shot at in real life, but in film or TV, it was I stopped watching The Walking Dead at the end of the season when the crew made it to Terminus. I don't know if any of you watch Walking Dead, but there's a scene at the end when they reach the end of the rail. They're following the railroad the entire season. Maybe season 5, maybe, I don't forget. But they make it to Terminus and they think that's going to be the Shangri-La. It's where, you know, and all these people that turns out to be cannibals, right? I'm sorry for revealing it to anyone that hasn't made it to season 5 yet, but so they've got them zip tied behind their back, their arms zip tied behind their back, and they've got them leaned over a horse trough, right? And they're just going down the line, slitting throats. And just talking about it is making me tingle. That is causing more PTSD than any time I've ever been shelled in Iraq. Something about it. That's when I turned it off and I vowed, and I'm glad I did, because subsequently, apparently there was a guy named Negan with a baseball bat that had barbed wire on it, and I definitely don't want to see that shit because I know it would have fucked my head up. Anyway, okay, getting back to Tracy. The true crime podcast, we haven't even touched on it yet. So it's history and true crime, right? And specifically, how often do you put it out? What was your latest show about? Just describe it briefly. And does your atheism ever bleed through into these podcasts?
Oh yes, I put out 3 videos a week. They normally come out Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And true crime, I've done my latest series. I did a 3-parter on Alex Jones, the conspiracy theory guy, and that was just very interesting. Really enjoyed doing that one. The latest big true crime case that I'm covering in depth the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell case from Idaho. It's basically they are a sect of Mormons that are LDS that are just really out there, and they've
Is that the FLDS, the fundamentalists, the ones in Colorado?
No, they're not the
LDS?
FDLS, but these guys, they're very, they're not fundamentalist LDS. They were all mainstream LDS, everybody involved in this crime, but they were basically a cult, this group of maybe 10 people, and they followed the teachings of one guy who's a published author and all this stuff, and believed that they were part of the 144, biblical 144,000, and basically they've been linked to the murders of 4 people. 2 of them children. So I've been covering that case, and my atheism came out. I've done maybe 10 episodes on that, including I've read a lot of the leaders' books, and I've actually reviewed and summarized those books for my listeners. But yes, they know, everybody on my channel knows full well I'm an atheist. I don't hide the fact, but I do have remarkably a lot of religious people that watch me. I mean, you have your average true crime audience, which tends to be middle-aged white women, for lack of a better term. And then I do have some men, because I do white-collar crime as well, and the men tend to really enjoy the white-collar crime. But then I have atheists that follow me, but mostly it's religious people. And ever since I started doing that Daybell case, I have a lot of LDS people that watch me. And I've had some very good conversations with some of them. They want this case solved. They are angry about it because it's solely you know, the reputation of their religion, so that they want it solved. And I've had some very good conversations with them. And no, I don't hide my atheism. I think it feeds what I'm able to talk about. Like I'm tackling a in-depth series on Anton LaVey and talking about him and the
Ooh.
Church of Satan, and then getting into later on the Satanic Temple. And my whole premise on that is how those types of organizations, do they help or hurt the atheist movement? You know, that's the question that I'm tackling. I'm gonna try to interview some people and in the atheist movement about that. So that's my next big project.
You mentioned the 144,000 chosen ones. That's not a Mormon belief. That's a Jehovah's Witness belief. So that's
actually a Bible thing. I grew up
right, but
yeah.
Lalandra?
Calvinist, they believe 144,000 select.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was just JWs. So
Maybe more than one sect believes that.
Right.
I grew up Pentecostal, Church of God of Prophecy, and they believed 144,000. That they believed it was like 144,000 Jews. That was their interpretation of it, where other people just say it's 144,000 saints. So it differs.
I had someone who was a Calvinist explain it to me. I said, well, how can you square that of all the billions of people that ever lived, only 144,000 are going to heaven and the rest are going to burn in hell? And they told me that imagine that you're a judge and you are a blameless judge. You've never done anything wrong in your entire life. It's mercy that you select 144,000 people out of people who are all sinful.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah. But the Mormons believe there's 3 levels of heaven. So, you know, according to this cult or whatever doctrine, the 144,000 would go to the highest one. I think it's called the celestial.
Yeah.
Then there's the telestial, and then maybe terrestrial. Anyway, there's 3 levels of heaven, and they're all like various levels of goodness.
I did an expose on the LDS Church before I even started this case, and I went into what they actually believe. And in their religion, it's actually, they must have been reading some wild Norse and Greek and Roman mythology like I did as a kid. But in their they have, you know, Jehovah is the high, or Yahweh is the high God, and there's an unnamed goddess that's his wife. And then he had 2 sons, Lucifer and Jesus. And they actually fought over who was going to be the primary god of earth, which was his greatest creation. And then Jesus won, and so they cast Lucifer out, and then that whole story takes over. And then they have this whole interpretation that like the angels that fought on the side of Jesus came down to earth, and they are the white people. The angels that fought against Jesus, they became demons. And then the ones that fit sat didn't take any centrists, Jim. We all came down to earth and became black people. And for the longest time,
they were cursed with darkened skin, the Lamanites, because it was a curse.
Lamanites.
I don't think it was black people. I think they were cursed with red skin. That became the Native Americans, right? No?
Well, dark skin is the way it's thing.
Right.
But if you look at their doctrine going back to their founding, they did not, for the long time, they didn't allow African American members. And then they did not allow African American members to be sealed in the church even after they admitted them. And it's only like since the 1970s or 80s that they've allowed African Americans full membership. Now, the Lamanites did become the Native Americans. I think even Mel Brooks made fun of that in Blazing Saddles.
Another movie that could never be made today.
Yeah, none of his movies could be made today, and it's so sad. Blazing Saddles is one of my favorite movies.
You guys mentioned 80s comedies. Lalandra mentioned 80s comedies that could never be made today, and like when you watch them now, they're like cringy. I just caught a few scenes of Revenge of the Nerds recently, and what they did, this fraternity of nerds went and climbed in the attic of the sorority and drilled holes in the shower rooms and the dressing rooms and set up cameras to watch them. Really, think about it now from our perspective, how crazy, how creepy that shit is. But at the time, we're just like, oh yeah, we get to see naked women. But imagine the
same with Porky's, where they look through the shower. Exactly. Sure, that's one of my favorites.
Let me switch gears. If I'm switching gears too much, you guys let me know. But I'm trying to cover all bases. So there's so many cool things to talk
can
about.
I get one thing in
Oh, yeah,
before
sure.
you change? You were saying your next, Tracy was saying that her next project is about Anton LaVey and the Satanic Temple. And the Satanic Temple has an issue with being confused with Church of Satan and Anton LaVey.
Oh, I
And
know that's Lucian Graves. I'm talking about, I'm doing Anton in the Church of Satan, and then that'll probably lead into the Satanic Temple.
I posted a story on Atheist Edge's website about the Satanic Temple has a ritual thing where you can say that you're a part of their temple, and you don't. If you need an abortion, you don't have to do a waiting period. You don't have to get a forced ultrasound. You don't have to listen to any of their fake medical stuff, and or preaching or whatever. And they make it a ritual, so it seems like that it's a religious freedom thing, where you can't force me to wait whatever because I'm a Satanist. And that's great for a lot of women, because a lot of women can't afford to wait 2 weeks to get an abortion.
Exactly.
But anyways, I put that on our site, and LifeSite News, I don't know if you've heard of them. They're
sounds like a
anti-abortion.
pro-life. Yeah, it sounds like a
Yes,
pro-life site.
exactly, group. And some of my friends call them Lie Site News. But anyways, they because the Satanic Temple has been doing so much work, and you're talking about how effective that is with or not with atheists. And they're actually, the Satanic Temple, just if you don't know, they're atheists. But already, but you knew, but in case anybody in the audience didn't know. So and there was this confusion on LifeSite News that they posted the story of a guy that performed satanic abortions, supposedly, and then they started talking about the Satanic Temple and some Christians shared it on Atheist Edge, that as if it were true. And that
do you remember the name of that person?
I have this vision of like somebody dancing around with a fetus on an upside down cross.
Lalandra, I think I remember. It was Rose and what's his name from the Satanic Church here locally, right?
No, the person who posted the LifeSite News.
It was on Atheist. Oh, I remember. Okay, I remember now. It was on our Facebook page, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, just as a quick aside, thank you so much for as Lalandra. This is her second episode ever as a host of Atheist Edge, and she's already just taken the ball and run with it. She is. I've been trained so hard to get Courtney and Chris when he was a host. Courtney is just too busy. Lalandra is in a great position right now to be able. Her kids are off, out of the house now. She's done with school for now. She's in a great position to be helping me out with this channel, and she's really been helping me out with the social media aspect, which I can't thank you enough. Also, but yeah, I remember that. I remember that post now.
So that's one of the issues you might get into, how the Satanic Temple is conflated with the Church of Satan, as if they believe in satanic abortions or a lot of the satanic panic stuff from the 80s, and they don't. It's more like a parody religion, if it is what it